Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Scottish football's child protection policies aren't fit for purpose, according to a report commissioned by the SFA. The tendering process for new Royal Navy frigates is suspended. What does that mean for jobs on the Clyde? Dog owners are warned to keep their pets away from potentially fatal algae caused by the hot weather. And coming up later in the programme.
Hi, I'm Sam and I'm from Glasgow and I'm 29 years old.
My name's Felipe, I'm 22 and I'm from Turkey.
Shauna Robertson from Australia.
We meet some of the hundreds of people affected by Down syndrome from across the globe who are in Glasgow for the World Down Syndrome Congress.
And we're at Celtic Park ahead of another vital Champions League qualifier, this time against Rosenborg of Norway.
Good evening. Scottish football's child protection policies aren't fit for purpose, and urgent restructuring is needed to prevent a repeat of historic cases of child sexual abuse in our national game. Those are just some of the findings in a damning report that was called for by the Scottish FA, following allegations of abuse spanning decades. But our senior football reporter Chris McLaughlin is here with this exclusive report. Chris.
Jackie, this is a report that's due to be published tomorrow, but we have seen some of the contents and they should make for some uncomfortable reading for those running our game. Over the past few years, Scotland's national game has been rocked by numerous allegations of historic child sexual abuse. Allegations that highlighted failings at the Scottish FA and at individual clubs. The BBC then revealed a shortfall in background checks for those who worked in football with children. Those in charge saw it as a crisis and knew it had to be addressed. 2 years ago, they announced an inquiry. It would be independent, it would address processes and procedures then and now.
Being more proactive in how we deal with the matters of child sexual exploitation is just a small
The
issue.
former head of a children's charity, Martin Henry, seen here at Holyrood, was appointed chair, and he promised a lengthy and forensic look at what had gone wrong in Scottish football. Now, the report itself has a total of 95 recommendations. It will highlight vulnerabilities in the system and advise that children are still at risk. In terms of background checks for those working with children, there are still gaps in the system. It will also need to highlight a need for clubs to have greater accountability around affiliated youth clubs. Now, it's a report that runs to 63 pages. It's now down to Scottish football to adopt some of those recommendations. More on that and more on the report itself tomorrow, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Plans for a fleet of low-cost warships have hit the rocks after the Ministry of Defence was forced to restart the competition to build 5 new frigates. It's being seen as a blow to shipbuilding here, as Scottish yards were hoping to benefit from part of the work. Here's our business correspondent, David Henderson.
The Royal Navy's the biggest customer for most of Scotland's shipyards, but yet again there's doubt about their latest order, what they want and when they want it. Here at the Govan shipyard, they're building anti-submarine warships, the Type 26 frigate. It's claimed this hard-won contract protects thousands of jobs for the next 20 years. But defence chiefs also want a cheaper alternative, and it's this, the Type 31 frigate. But the building programme's been suspended. Officials are not happy with the 2 bids they received, so they now plan to rerun the competition entirely. Unions warn it's a body blow to shipyards.
Because of what appears to be very shambolic, the defence budget and the Treasury seeming to dominate the arguments rather than defence, our concern is that that's what's going to win the day, and it will get delayed further and further and further.
This Scottish yard has most to gain from this new warship contract, if it still goes ahead. A steady supply of work to help it rebuild. The UK government wants this new generation of warships to be built at shipyards right across the UK. But Ferguson Marine, here at Port Glasgow, is bidding for some of the work. Now, they're looking to grow and diversify. So jobs here rely on this new contract. Rosyth in Fife could benefit too if the new warships are assembled here, like the aircraft carriers were. But one former shipyard worker warns that competition between shipyards may backfire.
What we need is actually them to pick a shipyard, get it to world-class standard, and that means it will be efficient enough to build them at the target price of 250 million. That's the way the government needs to go with this. The idea of a cutthroat race to the bottom is just not going to work.
Just last week, the new Defence Secretary was touring the Govan shipyard. He still insists it's full speed ahead on this contract, with the first warship launched in just 5 years. But that timescale and the price tag are now in question. David Henderson, reporting Scotland.
The Supreme Court has concluded its hearing into the showdown between the UK and Scottish governments over Brexit. The judges are considering whether the Scottish Parliament went beyond its powers in passing its own Brexit law as an alternative to legislation at Westminster. Here's our political correspondent, David Porter.
The car parks are empty. MPs, peers and their staff have departed. Now it's the tourists who are holding sway. Westminster is in summer holiday mode. But not everyone has gone to the beach. There's still a bit of business that needs settling. Can Westminster and Holyrood both legislate on Brexit? And because the politicians can't agree, the judges are being asked to sort it out.
Further hearing in a reference by the Attorney General and the Advocate General for Scotland.
Crucially, did the Scottish Parliament overreach itself in passing its own Brexit bill?
Just because the UK Act makes provision in relation to the domestic law consequences of withdrawal from the EU and does so for all parts of the UK, it simply doesn't follow that the Scottish Parliament cannot make provision in relation to the domestic law consequences of withdrawal as long as it doesn't modify the UK Act.
Just like the piper playing for the benefit of tourists outside the Supreme Court, many are keen for Scotland's voice to be heard. These proceedings have been brought by the UK government, but in closing arguments, a hint that Westminster's Brexit legislation may directly impact Holyrood.
The UK Act has recast the constraints on the devolved legislatures, indeed exactly as envisaged by the court in Miller. And it has, by its terms, recast what the Scottish Parliament is now competent to do in the context of withdrawal.
Independent observers are in no doubt of what's at stake.
On the one hand, if the UK government wins, then it's clear that its Withdrawal Act is the only game in town, and that will be the piece of legislation that controls how Brexit develops after March next year. If the Scottish Government wins, then it's much more complicated because we'll have two rival pieces of legislation on the books.
And from the presiding judge, a recognition of the complexities.
This is definitely one for the wet towels, so we'll go away and apply them.
The judgment is unlikely to come until the autumn, but the implications for Westminster and Holyrood are potentially huge. David Porter, reporting Scotland, at the Supreme Court in London.
Well, let's go to Westminster and our political correspondent, Nick Eardy. As we heard there, the judgment due later in the year, Nick, but the politics of Brexit continue.
Yeah, absolutely, Jackie. What we've heard over the last couple of days in the Supreme Court has been at times highly complicated legal theory. But this case matters a lot. And when the judgment does come back, probably in a few weeks' time, both governments will pore over what it means for the future constitutional debate in this country. And I suspect it will form a key part in future constitutional discussions, including, yes, on independence. But it's worth noting that the legal discussions are so important because the political views of the Scottish and UK governments remain so wildly at odds. We've seen that again over the last 24 hours. The UK government says it is increasing its planning now for the possibility there might be no deal with the EU when we leave. The new Health Secretary here says that could include stockpiling things like medicines and other goods to prepare. The Scottish Government think that is almost unconscionable, that the idea of no deal would be a complete disaster. They say the fact that these warnings are taking place now adds to their argument that we need to keep as close a relationship with Europe as possible after we leave. So yes, the legal debates over the last couple of days and of the future are incredibly important, but the political ones continue to be the most divisive.
Nick, thank you. Businesses that have suffered because of fires at Glasgow School of Art and the nearby Victoria's nightclub are being offered Scottish Government money to help them out. £5 million has been set aside for firms that are still within the safety cordons and who can demonstrate hardship. Glasgow City Council will administer the fund, which opens at the end of the month. Union leaders at the Bifab Marine Engineering Company have travelled to Canada to meet the firm's new owners as part of efforts to save jobs. Officials from GMB Scotland and Unite say redundancies at the Marine Engineering Company have led to the effective closure of its sites on Burnt Island and Methil in Fife and on Lewis. 7 people have been offered part-time positions from an original workforce of hundreds of staff and 1,000 contractors. Police are hunting 2 men responsible for what they believe to be a machete attack in Glasgow. They assaulted a 19-year-old with a number of blades as he worked in a car valeting business in Pinkston Road in the Springburn area of the city. He was left with injuries to his upper body and leg and received treatment at Glasgow Royal Infirmary. The attackers got out of a stolen blue Mini, which was found later in North Lanarkshire. Vets are warning of an increase in reports of toxic blue-green algae in Scotland this summer, which can be fatal to animals if ingested. The British Veterinary Association is urging dog owners to be very careful around affected water. Our reporter Ian McInnes is at Lochmorlich in the Highlands for us this evening. Ian, over to you.
Well, Jackie, it's been another beautiful day here in the Highlands, as you can see, but it's partly this prolonged spell of beautiful weather which is having this unwanted consequence, this blue-green algae. Now, despite its name, it comes in a number of forms. It can be a green sheen on the top of the water, but it can also form as a scum of green, black or dark brown scum. But it's the impact it can have on animals which has prompted these warnings today.
This idyllic river near Dingwall is a haven for dog walkers. But it was here that one family pet named Belle lost her life.
The pup had vomited at the side of the house. We rushed round to find the pup standing but wobbly, and basically it had brought up greeny, grassy material. Went right round to Dingwall Vets, went straight into one of the rooms that the vets use. The vet said, well, clearly the pup's been poisoned by the circumstances. And then from start to finish, the pup died within about 10 to 15 minutes.
It's in rivers like this, where the water is exceptionally low, that blue-green algae has been forming, aided by the amount of sunshine and sunlight that Scotland's been getting over the past few weeks. But it can have a particularly devastating effect on animals.
There is no treatment. If you get them to the vet quick enough, they can sometimes try and make them be sick to get any ingested toxin out of them, but once it's in the system, there is no treatment. If you suspect it, do not let your animals near it. Keep your dogs on a lead, on a short lead. If they have been swimming, rinse them afterwards with fresh water from at home, not from that source. And if you have any concerns at all, take them to your vet.
There have been reports across the country of algal blooms, including here at Lochmorlich, but tests are yet to confirm that. And awareness amongst dog owners is mixed.
I've heard about it, and yes, I'm concerned about it, and I certainly wouldn't want my dogs going in the water.
I don't know much about it, to be honest.
Yeah. We've not heard anything and we've not seen anything, so no.
I haven't seen any here, but you normally see it sort of ballooning at the side of the water where it's pooling, but I've not seen it here.
David and Bria both clearly miss Belle, but he wants his family's loss to serve as a warning to others.
We were shocked as a family because we didn't really know anything about that. Just be mindful if you're near any water, because we tragically lost our pup that day.
Well, this was clearly a very distressing incident for this family, losing their family pet. But as this spell of prolonged nice weather is set to continue, the warnings for dog owners are clear. They're always very keen to go and take a splash in the water, but the warning is clear. Keep them out of the water, keep them on a short leash if there is any suspicion that there's any blue-green algae in the area.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Ian. It's 16 minutes to 7, a reminder of tonight's main story. A report to be published tomorrow says Scottish football's child protection policies aren't fit for purpose. And still to come, how Scotland's £14 billion food and drink sector could be affected by Brexit. The latest research surrounding Down syndrome is being debated at a global congress in Glasgow. Now, the international meetings hasn't been held in the UK for over 30 years, and people with Down syndrome have been instrumental in bringing the event to the city, as our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
My name's Emily and I'm 27. I've got a really important job, so I'm going to be introducing to speakers and stuff like that, so showing them around and stuff.
And how nervous are you? Are you excited, Muslim?
Both. I'm both.
Emily is one of the volunteers making delegates feel welcome, and there's plenty of love for Glasgow. At the opening ceremony today, the focus was on bringing people together with Down syndrome. They've come from over 70 countries to take part in the 3-day event. Away from the social gathering, experts will debate the latest in medical research, from celiac disease to Alzheimer's and sleep.
There's been some research that is showing that in adults there may be a link between early dementia and you not having good sleep quality. And the meetings that we're having here are allowing us to bring together researchers from all over the world to talk about what they're doing in this area of work, and also to meet the people who this research is going to affect for the future.
But the conference will also discuss controversies around the introduction of a new DNA test to detect Down syndrome in pregnant women. Some are worried about its implications.
90% of women who test for Down syndrome go on to abort their baby, and that's an alarmingly high statistic. So we feel that as well as introducing, if you were thinking about introducing a new test, you have to think about how screening is done and whether it's done with a 21st century perspective or whether we're using stereotypes from the last century.
I think that my life is very fulfilling. I've got a job in Leamington and I've got a boyfriend in Weymouth who also has the X chromosome, and I also do a lot of this.
Wales is the first part of the UK to introduce the NIT test. England will follow in the autumn. But the Scottish Government say it's still considering recommendations on screening. Meanwhile, back in the spotlight and waving their national flags, the people taking part in this conference hope it will raise awareness of living with Down syndrome. Lisa Summers, Reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
People trying to get tickets for the opening weekend of Dundee's V&A Museum have faced problems. The first free tickets were released this morning, but the museum says its website experienced technical issues due to the high demand. The V&A Museum of Design opens in September, and general entry tickets are only required for the first weekend. Now, it's a growing industry worth around £14 billion to the Scottish economy. But what effect will Brexit have on the food and drink sector? Well, the Food and Drink Federation is urging the government to pick up the pace on negotiations to avoid further uncertainty. So how are businesses feeling? Katie Hunt has been to the Edinburgh Food Festival to sample opinion.
Scottish classics alongside Czech cuisine. This festival's all about food, but there's a small helping of politics too. And when it comes to Brexit,
I think it's horrific. It's going to have a massive impact on the industry. The prices of what we're buying, we're already seeing up to a 10% rise in some of the products that we're importing. Wine's pretty much 10% across the board.
a few metres away we meet Polish beekeeper Andrzej Zalewski. He doesn't support Brexit, but does see exciting business opportunities beyond the EU.
For the honey business, it would be the Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, where the honey is deeply rooted into the culinary culture, as well as Far East, China, Hong Kong and Japan.
Overseas food and drink exports were worth £6 billion in 2017. Food exports alone were valued at £1.6 billion, with £1.1 billion going to Europe. The UK government says it set out a clear vision for a partnership with the EU that will ensure frictionless trade and the smooth flow of goods. But industry leaders have concerns.
We're only 8 months away from the date at which we formally leave the EU.
We still don't have a withdrawal agreement signed. We have some uncertainty about the future of regulation within the United Kingdom. So will we still have a single market across the UK, or will regulation be different? So there's a great deal of anxiety and a great deal of concern about the kinds of preparations that may need to be made in order to try and keep food and drink supply going after March.
Back in Edinburgh, that uncertainty is being felt by many businesses.
What about VAT? What about imports and exports? Obviously, Stornoway black pudding would be imported, but halloumi and a lot of my ingredients maybe are. I just do a Scottish twist on them, so the sooner we can just get some answers, the better. It's all just kind of bumbling along at the moment with nobody knowing anything that's going on.
People here are eager to know what post-Brexit life will mean for their businesses. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Sport now, and Celtic are aiming to take another step towards qualifying for this season's Champions League. Tonight is the first leg of their second qualifying round tie, and they're at home to Norwegian League winners Rosenborg. Our sports reporter David Curry is at Celtic Park to look ahead for us. David.
Yes, Jackie, another summer evening and another Champions League qualifier for Celtic, this time, as you mentioned, against Rosenborg of Norway. Now, if Celtic come through this qualifying round, there's still another couple of rounds for them to negotiate before they get to the Champions League group stage. That being said, they played Rosenborg in qualifying last season and knocked them out. And let's just say the Norwegian visitors aren't exactly crowing about their own prospects this time. Rosenborg returned to Celtic Park 1 day short of a year since their last visit, leaving with a goalless draw in 2017, but losing 1-0 in the second leg in Norway. Despite running the Scottish champions close last season, their captain thinks they only have a small chance of prevailing.
We will play the Europa League last year, they played the Champions League, they beat us last year, and of course, if you compare the clubs, obviously Celtic is a bigger club, and now at least the first game is here, Celtic Park, and that's an advantage for them.
Norwegian expectations may be tempered because this man's only been in charge of the team for 6 days. Promoted from academy director when manager Kari Ingebrigtsen was sacked the day after the team reached the second qualifying round.
The job is now to make the players ready for this game and the week after, and analyze the opponent, what we did. So because we have to get results and work very close together and prepare them as good as possible. I think this is the job what I had to do the last couple of days, and I think that worked very well.
Well, in the early evening sunshine in the east end of Glasgow, Celtic supporters, including these alfresco diners, seem relaxed about their team's prospects.
Well, we've beaten before, so we can do it again. I think we're better over the last season.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get 2 or 3 goals. It's whether we can keep them out or no will be different. So yeah, comfortable.
I think it'll be tight tonight. I think it'll be a tough game, harder than it was last week. So I still think we'll win, but it'll be tight.
Well, that's their opinion. Let's get the point of view now of a former Celtic striker, Scott McDonald, who graced this fine stadium in many Champions League nights, joins us now. Scott, by and large, Celtic supporters seem confident going into tonight's first leg match. What about you?
Yeah, I think you've got to be playing at home, especially against a team that seems to be in turmoil, sacking their manager straight after they got through in the last leg. So, I think for Celtic tonight, though, I think it will be a cagey affair. I think with Dembele missing, that's a huge miss. And, we've got new lights, we've got new music system and everything. I think Celtic would want a new centre-half. It's going to be, 2 young, inexperienced centre-halves playing together. Gamboa at right back. So you're hoping they can keep it really tight and let the forwards up the other end, the likes of Sinclair and Edouard, show their qualities and hopefully get the goals that, see Celtic comfortable in the second leg.
Well, the Rosenborg manager was sacked apparently for not being attack-minded enough. Does that mean we expect them to go all guns blazing tonight?
Most certainly not. I think it'll be a very similar performance to what they put on here, this time last year. And I think it will be a tight, cagey affair, and I think there'll only be 1 goal in it. And I think it'll be the green and white hoops that they get it.
Yep, Celtic, will they have shaken off any pre-season rust now they've had a couple of competitive games?
Yeah, I mean, they looked ever so well in the last tie. Obviously, Alishkert were obviously not up to the standard, but they still look sharp. They had 10 men for most of that game. It's disappointing, though, Dembele and Griffiths aren't fit because they've been playing in a 3-5-2 shape this year. Now they're playing 4-3-3. We'll see how fluent they are tonight.
Well, there's more of Scott McDonald and friends tonight in Sports Sound on BBC Radio Scotland. Thanks very much for joining us, Scott. Back to you, Jackie.
And thanks to you, David. Well, it looks like a lovely night at Celtic Park. Let's get the weather forecast now from Christopher.
Jackie, thank you. Hello, good evening to you. It was a lovely, dry and sunny day for many of us today. Great picture from one of our weather watchers overlooking Loch Ness there. And through the course of this evening, plenty of sunshine before sunset. Any cloud across the northwest tending to move away to leave all areas dry with long, clear periods. Overnight temperatures around about 11 or 12 Celsius in towns and cities. So, to tomorrow, and whilst we have low pressure nearby with some weather fronts out west, we're ahead of it. That means some really warm air coming up from down south on that southerly wind. So a hot day tomorrow, sunny as well. And again, a lovely photo from one of our weather watchers, Stirling Castle there in the background. So tomorrow morning, any early mist quickly goes and then it's dry, fine, sunny and warm, if not hot, for some parts of Scotland, with temperatures creeping into the mid-20s. By mid-afternoon, it's when we'll have the highest temperatures, 25 or 26 degrees through central Scotland. Towards the west coast, more of a breeze here, fresh, occasionally strong from the south or southeast. Some cloud giving some hazy sunshine, perhaps some raining towards West Niles later, but elsewhere, plenty of sunshine. Chance of a little bit of sea mist affecting eastern coast of Aberdeenshire, but really it's a small chance, and some banks of cloud pushing through Shetland. But for most of us tomorrow, a dry and sunny day. And the rest of the afternoon into the evening, little in the way of change, although some rain just starting to edge in through the Hebrides. Looking ahead towards Friday, we still have that low pressure nearby, but it's this weather front here just edging northwards that's likely to bring some lively conditions, some heavy thundery downpours, whilst in the west, some welcome rain. So here's the chart for Friday. There's the cloud and rain in the west. And you'll notice on this chart, those showers a lot further east. So there's some discrepancy exactly where they're going to end up. But we think probably eastern Scotland will bear the brunt of them. They will be heavy, thundery, a lot of rain falling out of the sky. For most, though, it will be a warm, humid day. That's the forecast for now.
But we look forward to tomorrow. Thank you very much, Christopher. And that is Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with an update in our late bulletin, and that is at 10:30. Until then, from everyone in the team right across the country, enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.